Welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, brought to you by TournamentPokerEdge.com, the only podcast dedicated exclusively to poker tournament strategy. Now here's your host, Clayton Fletcher.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, sponsored by ACR Poker, where throughout the month of October, we've all got Venom Fever, a $5 million PKO with multiple starting flights. We've also got a $1.5 million PLO with day ones happening throughout the month of October. But you need to have an account on ACR Poker. And if you don't yet have one, I've got a great deal for you. Click the link in the description of this podcast and you can receive a 100% first-time deposit bonus up to $2,000 just by using the promo code TPE. My name is Clayton Fletcher and I am in majestic, fertile Baltimore, Maryland, visiting some family and friends here on my way to the DC Comedy Loft on Wednesday, October 16th, where I will be performing alongside Felicia Madison and Jordan Carlos. What a show that's going to be at the DC Comedy Loft Wednesday, October 16th. I just returned from Canada. I was performing at Yuck Yuck's Comedy Club in Oshawa, and I also got a chance to play on GG Poker Ontario. Now, some of you are in Canada listening to this, and you're probably laughing at me for having trouble getting money onto the site. I don't know. They wouldn't accept my ATM card. They wouldn't accept my bank account information. I'm like, take my money. And they were like, no way, Jose. We're not taking anything from you. But they did give me something like $200 worth of freebies. I mean, I got to play in these $1 and $5 spin and goes. I got to enter a $55 100K for free. I managed to spin up my free roll account all the way up to $23 at one point. I think it sits around $11.50 right now. But yeah, I like the site a lot. It's pretty cool. I just, I would like to have made a real money deposit on there, but I don't know what the tricks are. If you guys do know what those tricks are, please let me know. You can hit me up on Twitter at Clayton Comic, or just visit the TPE Discord, which you can join for free by clicking the link in the description. But yeah, Canada was great. The shows were really fun. But yeah, I got to play some live poker at this place called Pickering Casino. I hope I said that right. I couldn't find the poker room at first. I'm like wandering around this place, like where the heck is the poker room? Turns out it's in a whole separate area of the hotel. So I had to ask for directions to get to the poker room, which doesn't bode well in terms of people wandering in. But I suppose that's what they want at the end of the day. They'd rather we wander up to a slot machine or some other exercise in futility. Let's talk about Nick Vertucci, guys. I mean, let's just get into it. The big news this week. We don't do a lot of gossip on this show. That's not really the focus here. But this story was pretty huge. Probably the most popular live stream in the history of poker is HCL, Hustler Casino Live, which is the property of Ryan Feldman and Nick Vertucci. Well, lately there's been a lot of reporting about alleged sexual harassment by Mr. Vertucci, and I want to get into this just a little bit. Guys, I know that there are many beautiful women in the poker world, and that it is hard for us to control ourselves in the presence of such beauty, but it is very important that we do so. Now, those of you who have read the tweets or seen the screenshots or whatever, you might say, well, what he did isn't that bad. Now, I'm going to disagree with you here because he's in a position of power. True, she's kind of playing along a little bit, but you got to understand, this kind of reminds me of Louis C.K. and other Me Too subjects. Now, first off, let's just say there's nothing wrong with being flirtatious at the poker table, but you've got to use your powers of reading people to know whether your advances are wanted or not. Now, in the case of Mr. Vertucci, this woman had rejected him something like 20 times, according to her. And look, guys, by all means, shoot your shot, especially if you're not the boss, like Nick was. But if you're just a regular guy at the table, plenty of people we know have met their future wives or husbands at the poker table. Lonnie Huey, Vanessa Russo, Kristen Foxen, and on down the line. So it's not that there's no place for being romantic or flirtatious at the poker table. That's not the point. But the point is, you've got to pay attention. Go ahead, shoot your shot. All right, I'm all for it. Shoot your shot. But if the woman rejects you, leave her alone. And don't try 19 more times or keep asking her every single time you see her, do you still have that boyfriend? Do you still have that boyfriend? It becomes less flattering and more creepy over time. Now, if you factor in to that the fact that this person is in charge of who is invited to be on the stream and who isn't, when doing so has a lot of benefits for the participants, then you see how muddy this water actually ends up getting and why Nick Vertucci is no longer a part of the HCL live stream. So let's give credit where it's due, guys. He stepped down for the good of the broadcast when the heat got turned up on him. He probably also doesn't want other text messages to come out into the public view. Pure speculation on my part, but it seems very quick how it all happened. Like, one day you're hearing about accusations and the next day there's like an official announcement that Nick Vertucci is no longer part of this. Now, I understand Hollywood culture. I know what things like out there in LA, and that sexual harassment has been a long-standing tradition since the beginning of Tinseltown. But, time's up, right? Hashtag time's up. And it's time for men to start taking accountability for their behavior, especially when it comes to men in power positions like Nick was. So the only good thing I can say about this is that he didn't fight it. He stepped away, and that the consequences of his unprofessional behavior have so far been swift and severe. All right, let's move on away from that. That's not really my wheelhouse anyway. Let's go back and talk about two hands that we explored last week, but this time I want to use GTO Wizard, which in my opinion is the number one product on the market right now to help you study, practice, and analyze your poker game. So we talked last week about this $2.50 buy-in accumulator tournament. What that means is that every time you bag and make it to day two, the chips that you bag are added and kept as part of your day two starting stack. I think I entered this tournament 18 or 20 times, and I had made it to day two 7 or 8 times, and my stack was in the top 100 heading into day two. So we're going to take a second look at both of these hands, and this time GTO Wizard, our solver of choice, is going to let us know whether we were off or on, close or far away from a proper, correct, unexploitable, game theory optimized strategy. So the blinds were 2,500 and 5K with a 625 ante, 8-handed table. The average stack was 150. We had 165. So right around 33 big blinds. Action folds to hero on the button, holding pocket fours. I min raised to 10K. The small blind called and the big blind folded. The small blind had us well covered with 670,000. Obviously, there's no real issue with this pre-flop decision. The solver always opens any pair on the button, but the sizing is a little off. The solver prefers a 2.2x, and I just did a 2.0x. A very minor quibble indeed. Anyway, at that point, the pot was 30,000, and the flop came Jack of diamonds, 9 of hearts, 8 of diamonds, Jack 9, 8 with 2 diamonds. We have pocket fours with no diamond, and villain checks. I decide to check behind, and the solver is all for it. The solver says we are checking behind 98.5% of the time. So only 1.5% of the time do we make a little bet here. And I think that's just for balance, or so that no one can ever be 100% sure that we don't have fours because we didn't ever bet I mean, look, guys, if you see a solver output that says 97, 98, 99%, and you want to go ahead and round that up to 100% and literally never, ever bet this flop with pocket fours for the rest of your life, I promise you, you won't really see any material difference in your overall profitability. Now, if you never, ever do one of these very low frequency plays in any spot, in any tournament that you ever play for the rest of your life, then yes, that will have a cumulative effect to your detriment. But if you want to just go ahead and check behind 100%, I'm not really going to quibble with that. So we check back, and now the turn comes the Queen of Hearts. So our board is now Jack 9, 8, Queen with 2 diamonds, and now 2 hearts. Villain checks again. I decided to check behind once again, and the solver 100% agrees. It's a pure check back. It's just a terrible board for our exact hand. It's not that great of a board for our exact range, so why should we ever be putting more chips in when we are in position and have the option of not doing so? Just take your showdown value, such as it may or may not be with pocket fours, and see the river, and that river comes the 9 of spades, pairing the board. So our final board is Jack 9, 8, Queen 9 with 2 hearts, 2 diamonds, and 1 spade. And now the small blind wakes up out of nowhere, bets 10K into the 30K pot. I decided to make the call, but let's talk about his sizing, because the solver actually never does this sizing. The choices that GTO Wizard decides to split its betting decisions between are either 1/4 pot or 1/2 pot. Now, our opponent bet 1/3 pot, so right in between those two. And so we've got to try to finagle and fudge a little bit and figure out what all of this means. So let's first look at a 1/4 pot bet versus a 1/4 pot bet. The solver never folds pocket fours. The reason, of course, would be we're getting 5-1 on a call. And even if we choose not to call, we've got other options such as bluff raising when we've got such a small bet that we're facing. So we never fold to the 1/4 pot size bet. And the strategy there is actually calling 72% and bluff raising the rest, never folding versus a 1/4 pot bet. Now let's look at the 1/2 pot bet, which is the other sizing that the solver wants to use some of the time. We actually do start folding a little bit. About 10% of the time we can fold. And the reason why, of course, is that the pot odds we are being offered are nowhere near as compelling as they are when the villain bets a 1/4 pot. A 1/2 pot bet, we've got to be right a lot more often, and we probably won't. So we can actually start folding pocket fours. We're not getting that great of a price, is another way to say it. So given this bad price, we can start to fold about 10% of the time. And now we only bluff raise 2% of the time and call the rest. So our bluff raise went from 28% all the way down to 2% just by doubling the size of the bet on villain's part. So that shows you how important sizing becomes, whether you're the one making the bet or the one facing the bet. The sizing makes a huge difference in the proper strategy. So our opponent didn't bet a 1/4 pot or a 1/2 pot. He actually bet a 1/3 pot, and we decided to do something in between. We made the call, and we beat pocket threes. So I guess we have some calls, maybe not 28%. We could also have bluff raised with the fours. Given the way the hand is played, it's very unlikely our opponent actually has a monster. So we can see why bluff raising might be an attractive option. I'm pretty happy with how I played that hand, and especially by the fact that our opponent had pocket threes instead of pocket fives. Had he had pocket fives and played it this way, he would have basically value owned me. And that's part of the hidden luck of the game, right? You never really know until the cards are on their backs. You just don't know whether it was a sick value bet or a sick soul read or something sick in between. All right, let's move on, guys. Let's look at our next hand with the help of GTO Wizard. And guys, if you're not yet using GTO Wizard, I've got a great deal for you. We've got an affiliate link in the description. Just click that link and you can get 24 hours unlimited access to all of GTO Wizard's incredibly useful features. And then when your 24-hour trial period is up, you can save 10% off your first purchase, but you only get that discount if you use that link when you originally sign up at gtowizard.com. All right, let's do the other hand. Hand number 2 from last week. The blinds had gone up to 4K and 8K. The average was about 200K, and we had 185, so just kind of hanging right in there. The player under the gun folds. We've got about 23 big blinds and pocket jacks. I decided to min raise to 16K, and the blinds both called. Now, for our purposes in plugging this hand through the solver, we're going to pretend that only the small blind made the call. So now with 55K in the middle, the flop comes 8-7 deuce with 2 spades, and the villain checks. I decided to bet half the pot. I fired 27,000 into 55,000, and opponent called. So we are heads up in position. Hero with the overpair. There's 110 in the middle. We've got 140 behind. So our SPR is less than 1.5 with the overpair. And the turn comes the 9 of clubs. And villain checks again. I remember discussing last week the options on this card, and that I determined that checking was fine, but that betting is probably okay some of the time. I decided to check behind this time, and the river came the ace of spades. And now all of a sudden, opponent leads out for 48,000 into the 110,000 pot, so just under half the pot. And I decided to fold my overpair pocket jacks in the muck. So that's the action. And of course, pre-flop, solver has no problem with raising pocket jacks from second position. And yes, the min raise is preferred here. Now, before we had a 2.3, and now this time it's a 2.0. There are a few different factors. Number one, we had a bigger stack earlier, and also we had position earlier, and this time we're raising from early position. So those are the factors that help you determine the best optimal raise sizing. But again, I don't think it makes very much difference over time whether you choose 2.0, 2.1, or 2.2. It's kind of personal preference. But yeah, it does make a slight difference in the SPR and other mathematics going forward. Anyway, we raise with pocket jacks, and then on the flop, it comes 8-7 deuce small blind checks, and we decided to bet half the pot. So let's see what the solver thinks about this. With pocket jacks, we are supposed to bet half the pot about 22% of the time, just 1/3 of the pot 68% of the time, and the other 10% we're supposed to bet a quarter pot. Then the 9 hits on the turn and villain checks again. I decided to check behind with my pocket jacks, and the solver says, Clayton, you done did screwed up. The proper play is to check 0%. We're supposed to bet about 1/3 of the pot 61% of the time, and half the pot the rest. So I was wrong last week, guys. I thought that checking behind sometimes was okay, and that betting sometimes was also okay, but it turns out checking is not okay with GTO Wizard at all. So moving on to the river, the ace of spades hit, opponent shoved on us, and it was up to me with pocket jacks. And of course the solver never has pocket jacks because the solver would have bet on the turn with pocket jacks, so it's impossible for me to know what I'm supposed to do in this situation. But maybe that's all the more reason why I should bet and get pot committed with my overpair on the turn. Remember, guys, I started this hand with only 23 big blinds. When you have such a short stack, you should be playing most of your hands, if not all of your hands, as decisively as possible, because putting in a big chunk of a very short stack and then folding is an absolute unmitigated disaster, which appears to be what I backed myself into right here. All right, let's move on and do one more hand from this same tournament. Again, it's a $2.50 accumulator tournament with a $100,000 guaranteed prize pool. Oh, guys, I almost forgot to tell you, I'm going to Raleigh, North Carolina. Okay, I'm going to be at Lone Rider Brewery in Raleigh, North Carolina on October 24th. Now, guys, I've got a special guest coming with me on this trip. My opening act is none other than Bath Girl herself. It's me, Marnie B. We are coming to Raleigh, North Carolina to tell some jokes at the brewery that is owned by the head honcho of TPE, Derek Killingbird Tenbush, who will not be there on October 24th. You guys can get tickets by clicking the link in the description of this podcast. All right, new hand. The blinds are 4,000 and 8,000, and in the last 10 or 15 minutes, things have gone incredibly well. I've doubled up twice. I've now got 530,000 in my stack, which is over twice the average stack. And the action folds to the cutoff, who is a very loose aggressive player. He's got 330,000 in his stack, and he min raises to 16,000. I decide to go for a 3-bet. I've got the King of Hearts and Deuce of Hearts. I make it 58,000. And opponent calls. Now the flop comes King of Spades, 8 of Spades, 7 of Diamonds. So King 8, 7 with 2 spades. Hero with the King of Hearts, Deuce of Hearts. Now I decided to 3-bet this hand because I felt like my opponent was opening way too many pots. He was running about 40% VPIP, if that gives you any idea. And so, having that king blocker and being suited, I decided to put this hand into my 3-bet range as an exploit. And now he called. So there's 134,000 in the middle. And the flop comes King 8, 7 with 2 spades. We don't have any spades. We have King Deuce of Hearts. Opponent checks. I decided to fire out 67,000, so half the pot. And opponent check raises to 156,000, leaving himself with only 120 behind. What to do with the King Deuce suited? Guys, I wasn't really sure what to do, but I didn't come this far to fold. I decided to stick it all in and hope that I was up against a flush draw, which it turned out I was. Villain had the ace of spades, 10 of spades, so he's got 12 outs twice. And somehow, some way, I managed to fade that draw, and I won this giant 80 big blind pot late in the tournament. And at that point, I had a top 10 stack with 400 players remaining in the $2 100K. And that'll do it for this episode. We'll continue this tournament next week. Guys, please come out and see me in Raleigh. Get your tickets. Click the link. Give us a good rating. Give us a good review. We love you. You love us. For everyone here at Tournament Poker Edge, with special thanks, as always, to our very generous sponsor, ACR Poker. I'm Clayton Fletcher. Thank you so much for listening.
I wanna hold them like they do in Texas, please. Fold them, let them hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. Luck and intuition, play the cards with babes to start. And after she's been hooked, I'll play the one that's on her heart. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Can't read mine, no she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Can't read mine, no she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Poker face, poker face. Poker face, poker face. I wanna roll with her, a hard pair we will be. While little gambling is fun when you're with me. I love it. Russian roulette is not the same without a gun. And baby, when it's love, it's not rough, it isn't fun. Oh, whoa.